I'm Judith, 58, sitting in my quiet Ohio kitchen, the clock ticking past midnight. My phone glows with a text from my son, Roger. Don't come to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. My hands shake as I type back, understood. The words sting sharp as a winter wind. A faded photo on the fridge catches my eye. Roger, 10 years old, grinning at the county fair, his cotton candy staining his chin blue. How did we get here? I wonder if you've ever felt a family slip away, that ache of love turning distant. The kitchen clock hums its rhythm, a faint echo of evening when Roger would sit here telling me about his dreams. Now those moments feel like another life. Where are you watching from? If this story stirs something in you, please like or subscribe to share in these journeys of heartbreak and hope. The morning sun slipped through the faded curtains of my living room, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at my phone. Roger's text from last night burned in my mind, each word a splinter under my skin. I kept hoping I'd misread it, that my son hadn't meant to carve such a deep wound. I opened the message again, the screen cold against my fingertips. Don't come to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. No follow-up, no explanation, just silence. I stood my knees stiff from sitting too long and shuffled to the living room. My eyes caught on a knitted blanket draped over the couch, its blue and green threads worn thin. Roger used to wrap himself in it as a boy, pretending it was a cape while he ran through the house laughing. I touched it, the wool soft and familiar, and felt a pang in my chest. Had I missed something? Was there a moment I could have caught a word? I could have said to keep us from this. I closed my eyes, picturing him at 6, his small voice calling me to chase him through the backyard, the grass tickling our bare feet. The phone stayed quiet. I'd always gotten a morning call from Beverly, my daughter-in-law, chatting about her garden or the kids' school projects. Today, nothing. I dialed Roger's number, my heart thudding. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. His voice, calm and distant, told me to leave a message. I opened my mouth, but no words came. What could I say? Please tell me why you're shutting me out. I hung up, feeling foolish, like a stranger begging for a scrap of attention. My fingers brushed the table's edge, where a faint burn mark lingered from a candle-lit dinner years ago when Roger and James had surprised me with a birthday cake. A knock at the door startled me. It was Esther, my neighbor. Her grey hair pulled back, holding a thermos of coffee. "Judith, you look like you didn't sleep," she said, stepping inside. Her voice was warm but sharp, the kind that saw through you. I forced a smile, pouring us both a cup. "Just a long night," I mumbled. Esther sat across from me. Her hands folded and started talking about her garden, the roses she'd coaxed into bloom despite the dry summer. I barely heard her, my mind drifting to Roger, to the years when he'd clung to me, his small hands tugging at my apron, asking for stories about his dad. Esther paused, her eyes narrowing. "You're not yourself, Judith. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her to spill the hurt, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "Family stuff. You know how it goes." She nodded slowly, her face softening. "My daughter hasn't called in months," she said quietly. "Last time we talked, she said I was too stuck in my ways, said I didn't understand her life." Her voice carried the same ache I felt, a mirror to my own. I nodded, unable to speak, my fingers tracing the rim of my cup, its warmth fading. The conversation faded, and Esther left, promising to check in later. I wandered to the hall, opening a drawer where I kept old keepsakes. My fingers brushed against a piece of yellowed paper creased from years of being folded. It was a drawing Roger made when he was 6 stick figures of us, me, him, his father, James, standing under a bright yellow sun. My family he'd scrawled at the top in wobbly letters. I traced the lines, my throat tightening. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who wanted nothing to do with me. I remembered the day he drew it, his tongue poking out as he concentrated, proud to show me his work. My phone buzzed, snapping me back. A text from my granddaughter Lynn popped up. "Grandma, you coming to the reunion? I made you a bracelet." Her words were bright, oblivious to the rift. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What could I tell her that her father didn't want me there? I typed. "Can't wait to see it, sweetheart," and hit send before I could overthink it. The lie tasted bitter. I pictured Lynn's face, her wide eyes at last year's fair, holding my hand as we rode the Ferris wheel, the lights sparkling below us. I sank onto the couch, the blanket pulled close. Years ago, Roger had been upset when I chose to stay in this small town after James died. He'd wanted me to move closer to him and Beverly, to their city life in Columbus. I'd said no, clinging to the house filled with memories of James, the garden we'd planted together. Had that been the start of this? Had my stubbornness built a wall I didn't see? The silence in the house pressed against me, heavy and unyielding, and I wondered if I'd ever hear Roger's voice again, or feel the warmth of those long-ago summers when we were whole. I stood in the hallway, the stick figure drawing still in my hand, its edges curling from age. The house felt too still, like it was holding its breath. I tucked the drawing back into the drawer and walked to the kitchen, needing something to do. The dishes from breakfast sat in the sink, a small rebellion against my usual routine. I started washing them, the warm water soothing my hands, but not my heart. Roger's silence was a weight I couldn't shake. The sponge squeaked against a plate, a sound that felt too loud in the quiet. I glanced at the phone again, half expecting a message from Beverly to break the quiet. Nothing. I opened our last text thread, her usual chatter about her kids or her book club, replaced by a void. I typed, "Just checking in. Everything okay?" My thumb hovered over the send button. What if she ignored me too? I hit send anyway, my chest tight with hope and dread. Minutes passed, then an hour. No reply. I stared at the window where a cardinal perched on the sill, its red feathers stark against the grey morning. The doorbell rang sharp and sudden. It was my old friend Harold, his flannel shirt tucked neatly into his jeans. A habit from his days as a schoolteacher. He carried a loaf of homemade bread, his usual excuse to check in. "Thought you might like this," he said. his eyes searching mine. I nodded, letting him in, but my thoughts were elsewhere. We sat at the table, the bread untouched between us. Harold talked about the town fair, coming up the quilt raffle he was helping organize, his voice steady, but I could tell he sensed something off. "You're quiet today, Judith," he said, finally leaning forward, his hands resting on the table's worn oak. I shrugged, stirring my coffee. "Just tired," I lied. He didn't push, but his silence felt like a question. I wanted to tell him about Roger's text, about the ache that kept me up all night. But the words felt too heavy, like admitting them would make the rift real. Instead, I asked about his grandkids steering us to safer ground. He obliged, telling me about their soccer games, but his glance lingered kind and knowing. I remembered him at James's funeral, standing quietly by my side, offering no words, just presence. After he left, I wandered to the backyard, where the garden James and I had tended still bloomed, though smaller now. The roses were wilting, neglected since last week. I knelt to pull weeds, the earth cool under my fingers. I remembered Roger helping me here as a teenager, his hands clumsy but eager, asking questions about every plant. He'd been so curious then, so close, pointing at the marigolds and asking why they grew so fast. When had that changed? I thought of the years after James's death, how I'd buried myself in this house, this town, while Roger built a life 2 hours away. Maybe I'd been too stubborn, too rooted to let him pull me closer. My phone buzzed in my pocket and my heart leapt. It was Beverly, finally. Her message was short. "We need space right now. Please respect that." The words landed like a slap, cold and final. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Space from me. I'd spent years trying to be there, sending cards, calling, visiting when I could. What had I done to earn this? I recalled a Christmas years ago when Beverly hugged me tight, thanking me for a quilt I'd made for Lynn. That warmth was gone now, replaced by this curt dismissal. I sat on the back steps, the evening air cool against my skin. The garden blurred before me, its colors fading in the dusk. A memory surfaced unbidden, Roger's high school graduation. His face lit with pride as he hugged me in his cap and gown. I'd promised myself I'd always be his anchor no matter what. Now that promise felt like a lie. The hurt was settling deeper, a quiet storm building inside me, and I knew it wasn't done with me yet. I gripped the step's edge, the wood rough, and let the weight of it all pin me there alone in the fading light. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease, the morning rush in full swing. I tied my apron with shaky hands, the weight of Beverly's text. "We need space," sinking deeper into my bones. I moved through my shift like a ghost, pouring coffee, scribbling orders, my smile a thin mask. A plate slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. The clatter drew stares, and I mumbled an apology, kneeling to gather the pieces, my cheeks burning. The shards were sharp, like the edges of my thoughts, cutting deeper with every moment. Frances, my co-worker, crouched beside me, her ponytail swinging. "You okay, Judith? You're off today." Her voice was gentle, but I couldn't meet her eyes. "Just clumsy," I said, brushing it off. She didn't push, but as we stood, she squeezed my arm. My brother stopped talking to me last year, she said quietly. Hurt like hell, but I kept showing up. Sometimes that's all you can do. Her words were kind, but they stung, reminding me I hadn't shown up enough for Roger. I thought of the times I'd cancelled visits, too tired from work, too wrapped in my own grief. I nodded, forcing a smile, and turned back to the counter. The chatter of customers filled the air, but one voice cut through a woman at a booth, talking loudly about the family reunion in the park next week. Whole clans coming, she said, laughing. Even my cousin from Dayton. My stomach twisted. I pictured Roger there, surrounded by his kids, Beverly, all of them moving on without me. I poured coffee for a regular. My hands trembling so much I spilled it. He didn't notice, but I felt exposed, like everyone could see the hole in my chest. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too harsh. Back home, the house was too quiet. The evening light dim through the windows. I sank into the armchair, my eyes drifting to a wooden box on the shelf. It held letters from James, my late husband, written during his last months in the hospital. I hadn't opened it in years, but tonight I needed him. I pulled out a letter, the paper brittle, his handwriting still bold. Judith, keep the family close. They're all you've got. My throat tightened. I'd tried, hadn't I? But Roger's text. Beverly's cold reply. They said I'd failed. I clutched the letter, its edges crinkling, and saw James's face, his tired smile in that sterile hospital room. I read another letter, James's words blurring through tears. He'd written about Roger's first soccer game, how proud he was when our boy scored. I remembered those days, cheering from the sidelines, Roger's grin lighting up the field. Now that boy was a stranger, shutting me out. I tucked the letters away, my hands shaking. The silence in the house was louder than ever, and I felt it pressing down, a heavy reminder that I was alone in this fight. I sat there, the armchair's fabric worn under my fingers, and let the weight of his absence settle, a shadow I couldn't outrun. I left the armchair, the weight of James's letters still clinging to me, and wandered to the kitchen. The clock read 7, its ticking a relentless reminder of the day slipping away. I needed air, so I stepped into the backyard, the grass damp under my shoes. The garden stretched before me, its roses drooping their petals scattered like forgotten promises. I knelt, picking up a fallen bloom, its scent faint but sharp, stirring a memory of planting these with Roger years ago. He'd been so patient then, asking why roses needed thorns. I'd laughed, said they protected themselves. Now I wondered if he'd learned to grow his own. The memory stung sharp as the thorns I'd taught him to avoid. My phone sat heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, scrolling to Beverly's last message. We need space. I typed a reply. Can we talk just once, but deleted it before sending. What was the point? They'd made their choice. I sat on the garden bench, the wood creaking under me, and stared at the darkening sky. The stars were starting to show faint pinpricks that felt too far away to matter. I remembered stargazing with Roger as a boy, his small hand pointing out constellation, his voice full of wonder. That boy was gone, his absence a cold space beside me. A car door slammed nearby, and I glanced up, hoping for a moment it was Roger. It was just a neighbor, their laughter carrying across the fence. I envied them their ease, their togetherness. My mind drifted to the last time I'd seen Roger 6 months ago at Christmas. He'd been quiet, distracted, barely staying an hour before leaving with Beverly and the kids. I'd chalked it up to holiday stress, but now I saw it differently. Had he been pulling away even then, I'd given him a scarf. I'd knitted his favorite blue, and he'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. I went inside the house, colder than before. On the counter, a stack of old mail caught my eye. I sifted through it, stopping at a card from Lynn's school play last year. She'd drawn a heart on it, her loopy handwriting thanking me for coming. I'd driven 2 hours to be there, sat in the front row, my chest swelling as she took her bow. Roger hadn't come. He'd said work was too busy. I'd believed him, but now doubt gnawed at me. Was it me he was avoiding? I held the card, its edges soft from handling, and felt the ache deepen. The phone buzzed, and my heart jumped. It was Harold again, texting, "You sure you're okay? I'm here if you need me." His kindness was a lifeline, but it also stung, reminding me of who wasn't reaching out. I typed a quick, "Thanks. I'm fine," and set the phone down. I wasn't fine. The hurt was spreading a slow poison in my veins. I walked to the window, staring at the empty street. The family reunion was days away, and I could already see it. Roger laughing with his in-laws, his kids playing, all of them moving forward without me. The thought tightened my throat, a sob I refused to let out. I was losing them, and I didn't know why. The streetlight flickered, casting long shadows, and I stood there rooted as the pain carved deeper. The living room was dark, save for the soft glow of a lamp in the corner. I sat on the floor, my back against the couch, scrolling through my phone's voicemails. Most were junk, but one stopped me cold. A message from Roger saved from 3 years ago. His voice was warm, proud, saying, "Mum, you're the strongest person I know. Thanks for always being there." I played it again. His words a knife twisting in my chest. That Roger felt like a ghost now. I remembered the day he left it, calling after I'd helped him move into his first apartment, his voice full of gratitude. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, and leaned my head back, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked around me, each sound amplifying the emptiness. I'd spent the day avoiding mirrors, afraid to see the exhaustion etched into my face. Tomorrow was the community picnic at the park, a yearly tradition where families gathered, their laughter filling the air. I'd gone every year, but this time the thought of facing it alone made my stomach churn. I pictured the park, its oak trees heavy with summer leaves, the way it used to feel like home. Morning came too fast. I dressed slowly, choosing a blue cardigan James had loved, hoping it would steady me. Its soft wool brushed my skin, a faint comfort. The park was alive with chatter kids running through the grass tables piled with casseroles and pies. I carried a basket of cookies I'd baked last night, a distraction from the ache. But everywhere I looked, families were whole parents, cheering for their kids, grandparents snapping photos. I felt like an outsider, my smile brittle as I nodded at neighbors. The scent of charcoal and fresh-cut grass filled the air, grounding me even as it hurt. I spotted a familiar face across the field. Joyce, my daughter, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. She was here with her husband and kids, but she hadn't mentioned coming. My heart lifted, then sank. If Joyce was here, did that mean Roger was too? I scanned the crowd, half hoping, half dreading to see him. No sign of him or Beverly. I approached Joyce, my steps hesitant. She saw me, her smile faltering for a moment before she waved. Her eyes held a flicker of unease, like she knew something I didn't. "Mum didn't expect you here," she said, hugging me lightly. Her voice was kind but guarded, like she was holding something back. We sat at a picnic table, her kids playing nearby, their shouts mingling with the crowd's hum. I tried to keep the conversation light, asking about her work, but the air felt heavy. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. "Joyce, what's going on with Roger?" "His text. I don't understand." She looked away, her fingers twisting a napkin. "Mum, it's complicated," she said softly. "He's upset about Dad's estate. He thinks you kept things from us, sold stuff you shouldn't have." Her words hit like a punch. The estate, I'd handled everything after James died, selling his old truck and some land to cover hospital bills. I'd told Roger and Joyce every step or so, I thought. He feels betrayed. She added, her eyes meeting mine, full of pity and something else, guilt. I remembered sorting through James's papers alone in the attic, the dust making me cough as I tried to make sense of our debts. Betrayed. The word echoed in my head, sharp and cruel. I'd spent months sorting through James's things, crying over every decision, trying to protect them from the burden. How could Roger think I'd hidden anything? My chest tightened, the picnic's noise fading to a dull roar. Joyce reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't even ask me. He just cut me off. The table's rough grain pressed into my palms, grounding me as the world spun. Joyce's words hung in the air, heavy as the humid summer breeze. I stared at the picnic table, its worn wood scratched with initials from years past. My mind reeled, replaying every choice I'd made after James's death. I'd sold the truck to pay off debts, thinking I was sparing Roger and Joyce the burden. Had I misjudged so badly, I looked at Joyce, her eyes avoiding mine, and felt a crack widen in my heart. "He never said anything," I whispered. "Not once." I saw us back then sitting in this same park, Roger tossing a frisbee with James, their laughter bright against the green. Joyce shifted her fingers, shredding the napkin now. "He didn't know how, Mum. He's been carrying this for years." The word burned. I'd called him every week, sent birthday cards, driven to their house for holidays. How could he hold this against me without a word? The park's laughter felt mocking now, families around us oblivious to the fracture splitting my world apart. A child's balloon floated overhead, red and bobbing, a stark contrast to the weight in my chest. I stood needing to move and wandered toward the edge of the picnic area where the grass met a small pond. My reflection wavered in the water, distorted and unfamiliar. A memory hit me, my mother Thelma, giving me her locket before she passed. "Family is forever," she'd said, pressing it into my hand. I'd worn it today, tucked under my cardigan, its weight a quiet comfort. Now it felt like a lie cold against my skin. Forever Roger had severed that in a single text. I touched the locket, its engraved words mocking my hope. A young girl, maybe 15, approached her sneakers, scuffing the dirt. I recognized her, Karen, the neighbor's daughter, her braid swinging as she held out a daisy. "You looked sad, Mrs. Judith," she said softly. "Thought this might cheer you up." Her kindness was a shard of light, but it couldn't pierce the darkness swallowing me. I took the flower, managing a weak smile, and she ran back to her family. I envied her ease, her place in a world that still felt whole. I remembered her at my doorstep last summer selling cookies for a school trip, her shy grin so like Lynn's. I turned back to the picnic, my legs heavy. Joyce was gone, probably chasing her kids, leaving me alone with the truth. Roger thought I'd betrayed him. Not just him, his father's memory. The realization clawed at me, raw and relentless. I'd spent years trying to hold our family together, keeping this town, this house as a tether to James. But to Roger, I'd sold pieces of his past, pieces he'd wanted to keep. I sank onto a bench, the daisy crushed in my fist, my breath shallow. The world blurred, and I let the tears come silent and unstoppable as the weight of his resentment buried me. The pond's ripples stilled, reflecting a sky I couldn't bear to look at. I sat on the bench, the crushed daisy still in my hand, its petals scattered on the ground. The picnic's noise faded, leaving only the hum of my own thoughts. Roger's resentment, Joyce's revelation. It was too much a wound I couldn't keep nursing in silence. I stood brushing dirt from my skirt and walked back to my car. The locket under my cardigan heavy against my chest. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Not on him. The car's door clicked shut. A small sound that felt like a decision. At home, I went straight to my small office, a cluttered room with a desk James had built. I pulled out a notebook, its pages blank, and started writing a letter to Roger. My pen moved fast. Words spilling out hurt confusion. Love. I wrote about the estate, how I'd sold the truck to keep us afloat, how every choice was for him and Joyce. I didn't hold back, letting the ache pour onto the page. "You're my son," I wrote, "and I'll fight for you even if you won't." I folded the letter, my hands steady now, but I didn't seal it. Sending it felt too final. I set it beside a small wooden carving of a bird Roger had made in shop class, its wings uneven but proud. I needed another way. I picked up my phone and called Joyce, my voice calmer than I felt. "I need to understand Roger," I said when she answered. "Can you help me?" She hesitated, then agreed to talk later. Her voice was soft, torn, but it was enough to keep me going. I scrolled through my contacts, stopping at Paul Rogers' old high school coach. He'd known Roger as a boy, seen him through tough years after James died. If anyone could reach him, it was Paul. I remembered Paul at Roger's games, cheering louder than anyone, his belief in my son unshakable. I dialed, my heart pounding. Paul answered, his voice gravelly but warm. "Judith, been a while." I took a breath, then told him about Roger's text, the estate misunderstanding, the wall between us. "Can you talk to him?" I asked. "Just Get him to hear me." Paul was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been through this with my own kids. I'll try." His promise was a spark, small but real. I thanked him, my voice catching as I recalled his steady presence at James's memorial, a hand on my shoulder. I hung up feeling lighter, like I'd taken a step out of the dark. I opened my notebook again, not to write to Roger, but to myself. I jotted down memories, his first bike ride, the way he'd clung to me after nightmares, his small hand in mine as we crossed the street. I needed to remember who we were before this. The words grounded me, a quiet strength building inside, urging me to keep moving forward. I closed the notebook, my fingers brushing the bird carving, and felt a flicker of resolve, like a candle refusing to go out. The notebook lay open, my scrawled memories of Roger filling the page. I closed it, my fingers lingering on the cover, and walked to the kitchen. A small recipe card, tucked under a magnet on the counter, caught my eye. It was for apple pie. Roger's favourite, written in my mother's neat handwriting. I could still see him as a boy, perched on a stool, licking cinnamon from his fingers while we baked. The memory steadied me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. I heard his giggle, then high and free as he sneaked a bite of dough. I pulled out flour sugar apples, moving with purpose. Baking wasn't just a distraction. It was a claim, a way to say I hadn't given up. The dough came together under my hands, soft and pliable, and I rolled it out, the rhythm calming my racing thoughts. As I sliced apples, I thought about Paul's call to Roger. Would he listen? Would he care? I didn't know, but waiting for someone else to fix this wasn't enough anymore. The knife's steady cuts echoed my resolve, each slice a small act of defiance. I set the pie to bake, the oven's warmth filling the room. My phone buzzed, a text from my grandson Billy, with a photo of a crayon drawing a treehouse we'd built in the backyard years ago. "Miss you, Grandma," he wrote. My heart softened, but it also steeled me. Billy and Lynn deserved a family that didn't fracture. I replied, "Miss you too, kiddo. Got a surprise for you soon." The pie was part of it, but so was my resolve. I pictured Billy's proud grin when we'd finished that treehouse, his small hands hammering nails beside mine. I called Joyce again, catching her as she was leaving work. "I'm not letting this go," I told her, my voice firm. "I need to know what Roger thinks I did wrong. Can you get him to talk to me?" She sighed, but I heard a shift in her tone. "I'll try, Mum. He's stubborn, but he's hurting too." Her words gave me a sliver of hope, but also a new weight. Roger was hurting. I hadn't seen it before. I recalled a call from Joyce years ago, crying about a fight with Roger, how he'd shut her out too. Maybe this wasn't just about me. The pie's aroma filled the house, sweet and sharp. I sat at the table, staring at the letter to Roger, still unsealed. I picked up my pen again, not to add to it, but to write a new note, this one to myself. "You are enough." I wrote the words, feeling foreign but necessary. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket, a quiet vow. The oven timer dinged, and I stood, my eyes fixed on the golden crust cooling on the counter. This was my first step, small, but mine, and I wasn't turning back. The kitchen felt alive, the pie's warmth, a small defiance against the cold of Roger's silence. The apple pie sat cooling on the counter, its scent lingering as I paced the porch, the evening air thick with summer. My phone felt like a stone in my pocket, heavy with the weight of waiting. Paul had promised to call Roger to bridge the gap. I couldn't. I'd written my truth baked, my offering reached out to Joyce. Now I could only wait. But waiting felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground unsteady beneath me. The porch's wooden boards creaked under my steps, a sound that echoed my restless heart. My phone rang, startling me. It was Paul. His voice measured but heavy. "Judith." "I spoke to Roger," he said. "He's angry, says you sold his dad's things without asking. But he's thinking about talking. Give him time." My heart sank, then flickered with hope. Angry but thinking. It wasn't much, but it was something. I thanked Paul, my voice steady despite the churn inside. I sat on the porch swing, the creak of its chains a quiet rhythm. I remembered Paul coaching Roger, his patience when Roger missed a shot, his belief that effort mattered more than perfection. Before I could settle, my phone lit up again. Notifications flooded in missed calls, one after another, from Roger, then Beverly. My breath caught. 99 missed calls, the screen read all from the last hour. My hands shook as I scrolled through them. No voicemails, just relentless attempts to reach me. Had Paul's call stirred something, panic, regret? Or was it more anger I wanted to call back, but fear stopped me? What if they were calling to cement the rift, to make it final? I stood the swing, swaying behind me, and gripped the railing, its paint chipped under my fingers. I went inside the porch swing, still swaying behind me. The pie sat untouched, a symbol of my hope, now tinged with doubt. I walked to the dining room where a small china cabinet held relics of my life with James. Among them was a chipped teacup, one my grandmother Agnes had used for Sunday tea. I lifted it, its delicate handle worn smooth. She'd always said family was worth fighting for, but this fight felt one-sided. Roger's calls, Beverly's too, they were a storm I didn't know how to face. I saw Agnes in her kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, her smile steady, even after losing her own brother to a feud. I set the teacup down, my fingers lingering on its rim. The flurry of calls had shifted something, but it wasn't relief. It was a new kind of weight. A question I couldn't answer. What did they want now? The silence that followed was louder than the ringing, and I stood there frozen. The unanswered calls echoing in my mind like a door slammed shut. The dining room's walls seemed to close in the air, thick with the ghosts of what I'd thought we were. I stood frozen in the dining room, the phone screen dark now, those 99 missed calls, a silent accusation. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. I walked to the window, the street outside empty under the streetlights. My reflection stared back, older than I remembered, lines etched deeper around my eyes. I'd stirred something with that call to Paul, but the flood of calls from Roger and Beverly left me unsteady, like I'd opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. The streetlight's glow cast a faint shadow, my silhouette alone against the glass. A text came through, just one line from Beverly. We need to talk. Please. No warmth, no apology, just a demand that felt like another wall. I didn't respond, my fingers too heavy to type. Instead, I went to Norma's house, a family friend who'd seen us through James's illness. Her kitchen was warm, lit by a single bulb, the smell of fresh bread lingering. Joyce was already there, her face tight, sipping tea. Norma's table was cluttered with old photos, reminders of gatherings we'd all shared years ago. Roger's a mess, Joyce said, her voice low, like she was afraid to break the air. Paul's call hit him hard. He didn't expect you to reach out like that. Her words were careful, but they cut. Didn't expect me to fight for him. I sat across from her, my hands folded to hide their trembling. Norma set a mug in front of me, her eyes kind but searching. "Families bend, Judith," she said. Mine did. Took years to mend, but we're talking again. Her story was meant to comfort, but it only deepened the ache. Years I saw Norma at James's wake, her quiet strength holding us up when I couldn't stand. Joyce glanced at me, then away. "He's coming to the reunion," she said. "I told him you might be there." He didn't say no. My heart lurched a chance, but shadowed by fear. What if I went and he turned away? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I pulled out a small gift. I'd prepared a photo album of our family's old summers camping trips, birthdays, moments I thought we'd all cherished. My hands shook as I slid it across the table to Joyce. "For the kids," I said, "if he'll let them have it." I remembered picking those photos, each one a stitch in the fabric of our past. Norma watched me, her silence heavy with understanding. Joyce took the album, her fingers brushing mine, but she didn't meet my eyes. The room felt smaller, the weight of their calls, their silence, their half-spoken truths pressing in. I stood to leave, my legs unsteady, the album left behind like a piece of myself. Outside, the night was cool, but it offered no relief. I walked home, each step heavier, the hope I'd felt earlier slipping away, leaving only a quiet, hollow dread. The stars above were faint, and I felt their distance a mirror to the gap I couldn't close. The morning of the family reunion dawned soft, the sky a pale grey over the park pavilion. I stood in my bedroom, smoothing the wrinkles from a simple cotton dress, its soft blue a quiet choice. The photo album I'd given Joyce rested in a tote bag, its weight a reminder of the hope I was carrying. I drove to the park, my hands steady on the wheel, the radio off. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like running from the silence. The road stretched quiet, lined with cornfields, their green a steady presence. The pavilion was alive with voices, tables covered in checkered cloths, the air thick with the smell of grilled corn and lemonade. I scanned the crowd, my heart catching at every tall figure, wondering if it was Roger. I didn't see him, but Lynn and Billy spotted me first, their small bodies barreling through the grass. Grandma Lynn shouted, her bracelet jingling as she hugged me. Billy clung to my side, his smile wide, oblivious to the tension. Their warmth was a balm, stitching something inside me back together. I knelt, feeling Lynn's small hand in mine, her fingers sticky from candy. I set the album on a table, its cover worn from years of handling. Kids ran past, their laughter sharp and bright, and I sat on a bench watching. A woman approached, her hair streaked with silver Gladys. An old neighbor who'd moved across town. "Judith." "It's been ages," she said, settling beside me. Her voice was warm, weathered by years. "Saw my son last month after 2 years of silence. Took time, but we're talking again." Her words landed softly, not a promise, but a possibility. I remembered Gladys at my wedding, her laughter bright as she danced with James. I nodded my eyes on the horizon where the park met the trees. A memory stirred, not of Roger but of my own mother, her hands kneading dough in our old kitchen, humming a tune I couldn't name. She'd always said peace came from letting go, not holding tighter. I hadn't understood then, but now with the reunion buzzing around me, I felt it. I wasn't here to force Roger to see me. I was here to show I hadn't given up. The breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle, and I breathed it in, letting it anchor me. Lynn tugged at my hand, pulling me toward a game of tag. I laughed, letting her lead me, the grass cool under my feet. For a moment I was just a grandmother, not a mother carrying a wound. The weight of Roger's absence was still there, but it didn't crush me. I glanced at the album, its pages holding years of love, and felt a quiet strength settle in, like a breath held too long finally released. I ran with Lynn, her giggles lifting me, and for a moment the world was simple again. Lynn ran off to join her cousins, her laughter fading into the hum of the reunion. I sat back on the bench, the photo album untouched on the table. The crowd moved around me, a blur of voices and clinking dishes. I spotted Roger across the pavilion, his shoulders stiff, talking to an uncle. Our eyes didn't meet, and I didn't force them to. His presence was enough. A quiet proof he hadn't walked away completely. I noticed his hands fidgeting like they did when he was nervous as a boy, and it softened something in me. I leaned back, the benches wood warm from the sun. A breeze carried the scent of pine, and I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. A song drifted from the pavilion's speakers, an old folk tune James used to hum while fixing his truck. It wasn't loud, but it wrapped around me soft and familiar. I remembered dancing with him in our kitchen, his hands steady on my waist, promising we'd face anything together. That promise was gone, but its echo gave me strength. I could still feel the linoleum under my feet, the way we'd swayed, laughing at our clumsiness. Gladys was still beside me, her hands folded in her lap. "You're stronger than you know, Judith," she said. Her voice low, I smiled, not trusting my voice. She didn't know the half of it, the nights I'd spent questioning every choice, the weight of Roger's silence. But her words settled something in me, like a stone smoothed by a river. I thought of her garden, how she'd tended it through storms, much like I was tending this fragile hope. I stood walking to a quieter corner of the park, where wildflowers grew in patches. I bent down, picking a single daisy, its petals fragile but whole. It reminded me of the ones I'd tucked into my hair as a girl, dreaming of a life full of love. I'd made mistakes, held too tightly to this town, this house, thinking it would keep us all close. Roger's anger wasn't mine to carry anymore. I forgave him not out loud, but in the quiet of my heart, where it mattered most. The daisy's softness reminded me of my mother's hands, gentle, even when life wasn't. I tucked the daisy into my pocket and looked back at the pavilion. The music played on, families laughed, and Roger stood in the distance, still not looking my way. I didn't need him to. I was here whole in my own way, and that was enough. The day felt lighter now, the air easier to breathe as I stood rooted in a peace I hadn't expected to find. I walked back slowly, the grass brushing my ankles, carrying that peace like a quiet promise to myself. Weeks passed since the reunion, and I found myself in the garden, the late summer sun warm on my shoulders. I knelt among the marigolds, their golden heads bobbing in the breeze. My hands worked the soil, planting bulbs for next spring, a small act of faith in tomorrow. The house was quieter now, but it didn't feel empty anymore. I'd started a new habit, sitting here each morning with a cup of tea, letting the world wake up around me. The tea's steam curled upward, a small ritual that grounded me. Roger had come by last week, unannounced, his car pulling into the driveway as I watered the plants. He didn't say much, just sat on the porch steps, his hands clasped tight. "I got your album," he said. Finally, his voice low. "The kids love it." I nodded, offering him coffee, and we sat in near silence, the space between us. Not gone, but softer. He didn't apologize, and I didn't ask him to. His visit was enough, a crack in the wall we'd built. I remembered his quiet visits as a boy, sitting on those same steps, telling me about his day. I stood brushing dirt from my knees and walked to the shed where I kept my gardening tools. A small tin box sat on a shelf holding odds and ends from years past. I opened it, finding a pressed flower, a violet from my mother's funeral. Its color faded but intact. I held it, remembering her quiet strength, how she'd faced her own losses without bitterness. I'd spent so long afraid of losing Roger, of failing her, that I'd forgotten how to just be. Her voice echoed in my mind, calm and steady, urging me to keep going. Inside, I set the violet on the kitchen table and pulled out my journal, its pages now half filled with thoughts I hadn't dared write before. I wrote about the reunion, about Lynn's bracelet, Billy's hug, the way Roger's presence had felt like a step, not a leap. I wasn't chasing him anymore, not begging for a place in his life. I was building my own here in this garden, this house, this moment. The pen moved slowly, each word a choice to keep going. I added a line about the bulbs, how they'd bloom next spring. A promise I was making to myself. I glanced out the window, the evening sky streaked with pink. The garden was taking shape, its rows neat, its colors alive. I felt it too, a quiet rebuilding, not perfect, but mine. I sipped my tea, the cup warm in my hands, and let the day settle around me, steady and whole, ready for whatever came next. The garden's quiet hum felt like a heartbeat mine, and the earth's moving forward together. I closed my journal, the violet still resting on the table, its faint scent mingling with the evening air. I walked to the living room where a small wooden frame held a photo of me and Roger at his college graduation. His arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling wide. I hadn't looked at it in months, but now I did, tracing the edges of his face. We weren't fixed, not fully, but we were talking. Last night he'd called just to check in, his voice softer than before. "I'm trying, Mum," he'd said. I didn't push for more. Trying was enough. I remembered that day, the pride in his eyes, the way we'd laughed over cheap pizza afterward. I sat on the couch, the room bathed in the soft glow of a lamp. My life had been a series of promises to James, to my mother, to Roger, some kept, some broken. I'd spent years holding tight to what I thought family should be, clinging to this house, these memories, as if they could keep us whole. But love wasn't about control. It was about showing up even when it hurt, and letting go when it was time. I'd learned to forgive Roger, not for him, but for me, to free myself from the weight of his anger. That lesson came slowly, like dawn creeping over the hills, quiet but undeniable. That forgiveness had changed me. I wasn't the woman who'd sat frozen in her kitchen staring at a text that broke her heart. I was someone who planted bulbs, who wrote truths, who showed up at a reunion despite the fear. I'd found a quiet strength, not in fixing everything, but in living through it. Family wasn't a perfect picture. It was the messy, stubborn choice to keep loving even when it wasn't returned. I thought of the violet, its resilience despite its fragility, and saw myself in it, still here, still growing. I stood walking to the window, the stars bright above the garden. I thought of Joyce, her steady support, and Lynn and Billy, their laughter, a thread tying us together. I'd spent too long fearing loss, but now I saw what I'd gained: a life built on my own terms, rooted in love that didn't demand perfection. I was enough, and that was the hardest, truest lesson of all. The night was still, the garden a quiet promise under the stars, and I felt whole, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd learned to carry it. What's a moment that taught you to let go or hold on? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story, to know what's shaped your heart through the years. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, or share to keep these stories of healing alive. Thank you for listening, for sitting with me through this journey. Here's to finding peace in our own way, one small step at a time.